A top for $6.60 is a pretty nice deal. Was it in volume 2 actually? It's so beautiful. I just forgot like how nice lace knitting is. I should have looked that up really. Hello and welcome back, or if you're new here, welcome to my channel. My name is Juliette and I'm a knitter based in Cambridge. Today you join me on a really beautiful sunny day and this is podcast number 11. So let's get right into the podcast. Today's first finished object is actually what I'm wearing, which is the ivy top. Now I have a whole project vlog dedicated to this that I've posted last week. So if you want to check out how the process of knitting this top was, you can check that video out. The ivy top is one of the new releases from Petite Knit. I think it's been out for about 2 months now, and I've seen a lot of people knitting it up on Instagram, and I've got totally influenced by those people to knit this. Just to summarize the project vlog, it was a really quick knit and it took about 3 balls of Drops Belle to knit this up into like quite a cropped length that reaches the top of my high-waisted jeans. I also shortened the armhole depth to be 3 centimeters shorter than what is actually recommended. So for the size S that I knitted, the armhole depth was going to be 21 centimeters, but gauging other like knitted tops that I've made and other tops that I wear in the summer, I've kind of made the decision that 21 centimeter was going to be probably too deep, and it's also something that I had seen a few other people comment about. So I decided to do this armhole depth 18 centimeters instead. So I just shortened whatever the pattern instruction was saying to knit until before you start the armhole increases by 3 centimeters. If you want more details about this top, you'd go check out the project vlog. I can now safely attest that this top has been a huge success because I've been wearing it loads, honestly. This is the one thing that I didn't comment about in the project vlog, is the wearability of it, because I had just finished it and only worn it like once or something. But this top honestly is so easy to wear. I love wearing it with high-waisted jeans like this, and the feel of the yarn against my skin is so nice. It doesn't feel like I'm wearing like anything knitted. It feels like any sort of cotton t-shirt that you would get in the high street or whatever. So it feels super nice, and I'm really pleasantly surprised by Drops Belle's quality. Now I know Drops Belle is quite the dupe for Sandnes Garn Line, so I am yet to try that yarn, but I will be keen to try just to see, is there actually a difference that justifies the difference in price? This is the color of Drops Belle that I used. It's the color number 12 Cherry, and it's like such a nice blue toned red, which I said in the project log, I think I would call it more of a raspberry color than a cherry. But yeah, it's a super nice color. I've actually already purchased yarn quantity for making another one of these in a different color, which I'll show. So in the project vlog, I asked which color I should pick between this pea shoot green and yellow. I ended up choosing green in the end. This is the color 10, and I think the name is moss green. It looks like a cute matcha latte color, which I'm really keen on. So I'm super excited to knit another one of these in this color. So the Drops Belle I mentioned is very affordable. It's only like £2.20 on Wool Warehouse. And they also had a sale going on for the past month and a half or bit. So I grabbed these for $1.80 a ball, I think. I used just about 3 balls, like literally like finished the 3rd ball when I cast this off. A top for $6.60 is a pretty nice deal. And I believe the Sandnes Garn Line is a bit more expensive than that. I think like maybe £4 or £5 a ball. For half the price, I'm really wondering what is the difference between the quality in those two. And I think the only one that I could tell that it would be to knit another top using Sandnes Garn Line and then testing the durability. I think quality wise that's where I might start seeing a difference in terms of how well it keeps its shape over time. I also know that Drops Belle does not have as much of a range in colorways as Sandnes Garn Line does. Specifically, my friend was like talking about how she might want to make one of these in a Bordeaux color, which I think would be so lovely. I think it would be a perfect summer going into autumn type of top if it was in the Bordeaux burgundy color. Drops Belle doesn't do a color like that, whereas Sandnes Garn Line does. So maybe that's where you might want to like check both of them out, not just for the price difference, but maybe because of the different colorways that each yarn quality offers. Coffee break. By the way, do you like my chicken mug? It's a Rhode Island Red Hens from Emma Bridgewater. My partner grew up with chickens in his home, so he likes anything chicken related. And he's the one who got me this mug. The next finished object that I'm going to talk about today is this Berries and Bird Tracks pair of socks. Keen viewers of this channel might recognize these socks from a few podcasts ago. I'm quite embarrassed to say that I think I cast these on in May 2024, so they took over a year to just get them off my needles. I don't know why, because I mean it's such a beautiful pattern. The pattern is by Yuka, who is a Japanese sock designer. She's really famous for having these intricate cable textures on most of her sock patterns. She has like patterns that are kind of like slightly out of the ordinary as well, and I think that's what I really like about her. I discovered her through Handmade by Florence's channel because Florence is quite a keen knitter of Yuka's patterns. But I had the opportunity to knit her pattern because it showed up in 52 Weeks of Socks Volume 2, which I purchased about a year ago. Was it in Volume 2 actually? Or am I making this up? Berries and Bird Tracks. Yes, it was in Volume 2. Page 64 by Yuka Takahashi Yuka-san. This is what the socks look like, and I'll include some pictures of me wearing those socks as well. But it was a very enjoyable experience knitting up these cabled socks. It's just, I think I quickly lose my patience, and I also managed to knit these with tiny circular needles. So just to show how like easy these cable textures were to knit, I didn't have any struggles with my tiny circulars doing these up. Which was quite a pleasant surprise. It features this really interesting texture on here with like slip stitches on either side of it, on either side here, and then followed by this diamond shaped cable thing going on in the center, which goes from the toe up to the cuff. And then the heel flap is just a kind of a normal slip stitch heel flap, and this is actually a toe up construction, which I had never done before. I think this is great because you obviously can use up as much of the yarn as you want by knitting up the leg quite a bit further up. I stopped at the cuff length that was recommended by the pattern, partly because I just wanted to get these done, I think. I also was slightly worried that I will struggle with foot size because you have to account for, when you're doing toe-up socks, you have to account for this length, which is when you have to start doing the increases so that you can then do the gusset and the heel flap later on. So it's not like in cuff down socks where you knit until you've reached, you know, however many centimeters you need to do the toe. You can really customize the foot length to your needs. Here you have to hope that your row gauge is accurate, and I know you're supposed to gauge swatch, but I never really do for socks. Maybe that's just, you know, my own fault. But anyway, I was a little bit worried because obviously if my row gauge is off, then the number of centimeters that she recommends that you count for when trying to knit this foot length is going to be different. In the end, it wasn't a problem at all, and these fit great on my feet. Yeah, it was a great success. The yarn is from Market Town Yarns, which is a hand dyeing company based at Yarn Works in Hadley. I used to be a subscriber of their monthly sock yarn subscription. This was the March 2024 colorway, and I remember it very distinctly because I described it as the colors of dandelions, which usually start flowering in March or late March at least. So yeah, these I remember calling them my dopamine socks because back when I cast them on in like May or June 2024, I was a bit sick, and I was quite sick, and I was bedbound, so I was feeling quite sad for myself, and I just like wanted to cast something on that would bring joy. And I feel like these yellow dandelion socks really did check that box. Now, I did leave them for a really long time until I cast them off, but now that I did, I don't know how, by the way, I really didn't have that much left to do. I already had the first sock done, which I showed in my podcast episode 2 episodes ago, and I only had about this much of the second sock left to do. I really didn't have that much left on, and I think as soon as I realized that a couple weeks ago, I was like, okay, let's finish them off, and I'm so glad I did because now I have a new pair of socks. Now, I have quite a bit of yarn left over. I have like 43 grams of yarn left over, and this has been the case for pretty much every single sock yarn that I've used. I usually have about just under 50 grams of this sock yarn left over each time. So I think I'm going to keep those to potentially make some color work socks. I mentioned this because my acquisitions are a bit jumbled all over the place today. But this is a book that I picked up a while ago, but I don't think I ever featured it in the channel. It's a book of color work socks by Stone Knits, or her actual name is Charlotte Stone. Stone Knits on Instagram, which is like such an aesthetic account. She makes the loveliest colorwork socks. It's so cute. I mean, for example, we were talking about chickens, right? I mean, look at this. Chicken socks. So cute. Yeah, I think she's got a lot of really lovely socks that I would want to knit up at some point. I mean, look at this. This is so cute. I really like the lavender one here and the cherry one as well. But the chilies are also so funny. Anyway, I love all these patterns. And so because I've got a lot of leftover sock yarns from each time I've made socks, I think that would be a great way of using them up and eventually do something really nice with them using color work socks. Now let's move on to works in progress. So the first one I have to show you is actually knit up in the same yarn as this top, the Drops Belle in the color Cherry. Just to give you a bit of context, I had bought a yarn quantity of this Drops Belle to make a blouse number 1 after finishing my first one because I was really keen to try Drops Belle and it was on sale, so I bought like 8 balls. And so after finishing this top by deciding not to do the blouse number 1 in this, I had 5 balls left over, which I think is enough to make one of the lace t-shirts by Lynette. So I had a choice between the Palmer Tree or the Tulipan Tee, and I decided to knit up the Tulipan Tee with this cherry color. I am still working on the lace on the yoke. And you know what? It's quite funny because I know how to knit lace, and yet I never finished a project or at least a garment project that featured some lace work. So this is actually, yeah, my first garment with any form of lace work on it. It's so beautiful. I should have put this on like longer needles so you could really see the lace pattern. Oh, actually like this, you can see. Yeah, this is nice. So this is the yoke, and you start off with doing a bit of ribbing here for the collar, which is very short, and then immediately followed by some short row shaping of the neck. And it's really clever the way it was done because basically, do you see each of these is like one pattern of the lace, right? Each of these V's. And there's 3 in the front. But at the back, the center back, there's 4. So the way the short rows are done is that while you're doing the first V at the back, you slowly come and do the short rows towards the front. And then by the time the short rows are done, then you start the lace pattern in the round, including the front here. So yeah, it's a clever way of doing the short rows under the collar without it looking obvious. So I feel like you really can't tell that there's any sort of short row shaping here. And this is the front. And so this is the way the back would kind of be raised up as I'm holding it like this. It's so beautiful in this red color. And I feel like Drops Belle has really good stitch definition. So it's really, really nice for this sort of lace work. I was initially inspired by Andolini Knits, which is a podcast that I've recently discovered. And she knitted up the Tulipan Tee or is knitting the Tulipan Tee for a friend at the moment with using Drops Belle. She also knitted the Palm Tee using a black or like dark grey color. And I found that so cute that I actually went ahead and bought a bunch of black Drops Belle so I can make the exact same top, the Palm Tee in black. I feel like the lace on the Palm Tee would look really nice in the black color like she did. She looks beautiful in that top. And so I was like, I want one of those for myself. So yeah, I guess this is another acquisition for this video. I bought 6 balls just to be sure. I did say that the Tulipan Tee would probably be fine with 5 balls of Belle. I think it requires the 6 or 7 of this to make up the right meterage. But I've also noticed that Lynette had a really long t-shirt length in her pattern guidance, whereas I would make it much more cropped, like about the level of croppedness that this has. And therefore I think I don't need as much yarn as she recommends. So I think 5 of this will be enough for the Tulipan Tee. 5 of this is probably also enough for the Palmer Tee, but I bought 6 just in case. And again, I took advantage of the drop sale to get this in quite a cheap price. I'm really loving how quickly this is knitting up so far. The lace is really engaging and it's quite easy to memorize what's going on as well. It features these eyelets and decreases, so the techniques are very, very easy, and it makes up something that kind of looks complicated, or at least, you know, to a non-knitter's eye looks really complicated. And so I just forgot like how nice lace knitting is, and I really need to get into it more. And so I'm quite excited for this to be done and for the Palm Tee to be done as well. They're very engaging knits. It's knitted up in 4mm needles as well, so it's going really fast. And also the way lace always grows quite a bit faster than normal stockinette knitting as well. Overall, a very fast-paced project as well. So I talked about the Tulipan Tee first because it's like my newer project, but actually I've been mainly working on my older whips, which is first the Moby Sweater. Now, you might not see much of a difference between where I was at the last podcast episode where I talked about this Moby Sweater. Unfortunately, I had to unravel the sleeves, so I finally reached a point where that I was at roughly before I unraveled, or at least the point where I was at when I showed it to you at the podcast last time. I don't really know what happened. Basically, I noticed first of all that the top of the cabling was not quite exactly at the top of the shoulder, and then I thought also that the way I had put my beginning of round was also slightly on the side, and it's because of the way that you can really tell here, it's because of the way that the increases, rather the decreases, sorry, are really shifting to the side as well. So I was really perplexed by that. I really tried to understand what was going on. Maybe I unraveled a bit too hastily as well. But yeah, I was worried that I had put the beginning of round in the wrong way. And I also realized that I was doing my increases in the wrong way whenever I was doing, I keep saying increases, I mean decreases. I kept doing decreases in the wrong way whenever I was doing purl-wise decreases. If you didn't know, a knit 2 together is a right-leaning decrease, but a purl 2 together is actually a left-leaning decrease. And I should have looked that up really. And a knit 2 together through the back loop is a left-leaning one, but a purl 2 together through the back loop is a right-leaning decrease. This is important because on the sleeve here, whenever I've marked these decreases, at the beginning of the round I do a right-leaning decrease, and at the end of the round I do a left-leaning decrease, so all the decreases point towards the same kind of seam here. And so I thought that maybe the reason why everything was shifting to the side like this, when I hold it up, you can see that kind of like the way it biases. I don't know if you can tell. Yeah, like this you can. The way it kind of biases it to the side, I was wondering if it was because I was doing those purl-wise decreases in the wrong direction. I unraveled the whole sleeve. I had about, 8 decreases out of 12 done. So, 2/3 of the way done, and I had to undo it all. And then I spent yesterday and the day before re-knitting the whole thing again, only to realize that actually, this time I was doing the decrease leanings correctly. But I've actually since concluded that the way this kind of has a slight bias, the decreases here, is not because I was doing the leaning wrong. It's because there's a natural bias that happens when you're knitting in round. Because obviously you're going in one direction, right? So it's a long spiral, especially for sleeves, it happens more. You can have a bias because of the way that you are doing knitting in the round, and it's always in the one direction. So your stitches can lean a certain way. You might not really notice that with stockinette knitting, but I think I do here because it's double moss stitch, which has a natural diagonal shape. I don't know how to explain this well, but it does have a tendency to stretch well on different directions. It's not really a flat knitting stitch on its own. But when I lay this flat on the ground, for example, the seam of the stitches is fine. It's perfectly aligned. It's not on the side. And more importantly, the cables are nice and flat on the top of the shoulder. They're not like twisting another way. So I think it's only when I hold it up like this that I kind of start seeing a bias like this. You can really tell here how the stitches seem to go a certain way. But if I actually properly lay it flat and kind of force the double moss stitch to be straight, then it's absolutely fine. So yeah, all this to say, it's really interesting what you learn about the way different fabrics behave, particularly with like different stitch textures and whatnot. So yeah, I did hear about this bias effect that you can sometimes have with knitting, particularly for like twisted knit stitches. I'm gonna just keep on going with this sleeve and cast it off after the cuff, and I think it's absolutely fine. So because I had to redo the sleeve entirely, and I had to therefore pick up the stitches for the sleeves again, I actually ended up just picking up stitches at a 2 stitch per 3 row rate, and I ended up with less stitches than I did before. I don't know really how. Last time I ended up with 96 stitches when I did that, and this time I have 92. But it's fine because the pattern calls for 86. I'm just doing a decrease every 8th round for 12 rounds total, basically. So that was the Moby Sweater update. I've talked about this project quite a lot of times in different podcast episodes, so I won't go too much more into detail other than the new stuff, which is the sleeve. But just to say that the yarn is a Sunless Garn Peer Gynt in the color 9572. The next whip, I'm not going to talk too much about because there's not much of an update since the last time. These are the socks that I'm knitting from my partner. Just to say that I'm almost at the end of the sock where I am starting the toe decreases. My partner's tried them on and it looks really nice, so I'm glad that I'm close to having at least one sock done. And then I feel like the second one will go quite fast if I put my mind to it. I'm trying to finish this Moby sweater as quickly as I can, so I think I'm probably going to focus on doing both sleeves this week, as well as finishing this sock. And then I'm going to move on to my next work in progress. And so the idea is that when the Moby sleeves are done, I'm going to move on to the Porcelain Sweater sleeves, while I also try to work quickly enough to finish the second sock of this so it can be ready for when autumn comes for my partner. And the yarn that I'm using for these socks is the colorway by Salt and Sea of the Blue Faced Leicester sock yarn by the Camels yarn, which is probably my favorite hand dyer that I purchased from in East Anglia Yarn Festival. So let's talk about my last work in progress for today. This is my porcelain sweater whose body has been finished and blocked as well, so that's why it's looking so lovely and drapey. I'm not gonna put this on because it's a bit warm today. This is just so incredibly nice, and I'm so glad I did this mid-project block just to kind of give myself a bit of a dopamine boost for having finished the body, you know. Long-time viewers of the channel will know that I actually started this project almost a year ago in September 2024. So yeah, that's why I'm really making it a priority to finish these 2 projects in the upcoming month. Hopefully I can have both of these ready by the beginning of autumn. I'm really glad I did this mid-project block because it also tells me how lovely and nice and drapey this yarn combination has been. It's the Sunless Garn Peer Gynt and Focolana Tilia. I'll leave the color names in the screen, or you can find the Ravelry link for this project where I've put all the details in the description box. So last time I think we were at the end of the color work, the 3rd color work, and so since then I did the body ribbing and the Italian bind off. I am so happy with this. It's so nice. I'm really excited to finish this off. Not too excited to do the sleeves because the color work that first features in the sleeve is this one, and it's the one I enjoy the least because I think I've mentioned this in the past. While these 2 color works are very symmetrical, and so you can tell what's going to be the next stitch in your current row, this one you really have to finish the color work until you finally see a pattern, so you constantly have to look at the chart. So that's why I don't really enjoy doing this color work pattern as much, but it's the first one that features when you're doing the sleeves to match here. I'm gonna be a bit wary of the fact that when you're knitting up sleeves, because I'm using 40 centimeter circular needles, the circumference is quite a bit smaller, and therefore, because of the smaller circumference, your floats can be tighter without you meaning to make them tighter. And so I'm worried that the sleeves are gonna like cinch in at the bits where they're color work. So while I've been doing this whole thing in 4.5mm needles, including the color work bit, I think I'm gonna make sure I size up my needle size whenever I do the color work on the sleeve, just to account for that smaller circumference, making my floats maybe a bit shorter or tighter at least. Now I am going to talk about one thing about this that wasn't so good is the fact that I wound up my yarn into these like larger cakes. So I've wound up the Timperian and Tidia together, and that was a bad idea because what happened was that basically the yarns have different elasticity, right? And so when I wound them up, I think I probably made the Timperian quite stretch from putting tension when I was winding up the cake with my yarn winder. And therefore, whenever I've been knitting out of the cake, I always end up with excess mohair, which was less elastic and therefore less pulled up. The Timperian, being more elastic, has kind of become shorter without the tension that you have from the yarn winder as you're knitting it. And so yeah, I've ended up with really tricky situations with these yarn cakes where I ended up with like way too much of the mohair kind of being unraveled while the Timperian is just like chilling as it is. So I tried to like separate them, and it just made a lot of tangles, so I'm just gonna have to suck it up and like keep knitting out of these yarn cakes, which are actually not that convenient because of all the problems that they cause. I initially made these cakes to make my life easier because I didn't really like having to carry 4 different balls of yarn, especially when, like specifically when I was doing the color work. So yeah, I don't recommend doing that. Do not do that. Don't wind up the cakes of 2 yarns that they have different elasticity. If you're winding up 2 yarns which are the same and you're holding double, I think it's the same because obviously they'll have the same elasticity, so they'll wind up the same way and under the same tension, whereas this is 2 different yarn qualities, 2 different elasticities, so it just doesn't work. So don't do what I did. Don't cake them up together. So this concludes today's podcast episode. It was a bit of a shorter one because now I'm trying to stick to a better and more frequent podcast schedule. So I'm trying to do these podcast episodes every 2 weeks. Oh my god, dragonflies! There are like 3 dragonflies flying outside my window. So cute. Sorry, I got so distracted. Yeah, as I was saying, I'm trying to do these podcast episodes every 2 weeks. Let's see how it goes. Maybe I'll find that it's nice and I like giving you more frequent updates. Maybe I'll find that actually I don't have enough to talk about every time, so I might want to leave some time, more time between each episode. We'll see. And let me know how you find it as well. Like, do you prefer more frequent updates, or do you prefer I don't know, me going MIA for 3 months? So thank you for watching today's episode, and I'll see you next time. Bye!